Morning everybody, welcome to this meeting of the EMCCA Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Chris Poulter from Derby City and I'm chairing the meeting this morning. Just a couple of housekeeping measures. Reminded to put your phones on silent as he reaches for his own to do the same. Reminded myself. The meeting is being live streamed and obviously your attendance is taken as an acceptance that you may appear on it at various points of the meeting. For new attendees and those watching live stream, a round of introductions I think would be suitable. I'm going from my left first. Richard.
I'm Richard Williams. I'm Executive Director of Resources and Section 73 Officer at EMCCA.
Hi, I'm Nick Wash. I'm Director of Finance and Deputy Section 73 Officer.
Good morning, my name is Edward Highfield. I'm the Executive Director of Place at EMCCA and I'm here for the transport item this morning.
Good morning, I'm Alex Linton, Head of Transport Investment at EMCCA.
Abby.
Hello, and I'm Councillor Kevin Gillett from North East Derbyshire, representing the districts and boroughs in Derbyshire.
Thank you.
I'm Councillor Dawn Abbott, Cabinet Member for Health and Communities at Derbyshire County Council.
Thank you, Dawn.
Councillor Simon Abbott from Derbyshire County Council and Cabinet Member for Send and Education.
Councillor Emily Lonsdale from Derby City Council.
Councillor David Hughes from Derbyshire Vales District Council.
Catherine Stevens, Interim Head of Law at EMCCA, acting as Monitoring Officer today.
Emma Powley, Head of Governance at EMCCA.
Michael Edley, Statutory Scrutiny Officer.
Okay. And I'm Chris Poulter. Oh, perfect timing. Welcome, Sam. Welcome, Andy. All right, we just literally started and going through some introductions. We are, as a result, now quorate. So welcome, Andy. Could you do me the honour of announcing yourself?
Elected Mayor at Mansfield.
Councillor Sam Gardner from Nottingham City Council.
Wonderful. So we can carry on with the meeting. I have received apologies for absence from Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Mason and Councillor Powers. Any others? No. Any other apologies? They have a conflict of interest in terms of meetings in their own authorities, so they're unable to attend today. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest on the matters on the agenda? No? So that is a no. Previous meeting, the notes of the previous meeting. Are all members happy to approve the minutes as circulated of the previous meeting?
Yeah,
thank you.
I was a bit concerned. I made representations about the inclusive growth framework, that it didn't represent rural areas, particularly the districts of Derbyshire Dales and High Peak, and I think the consequence of that was going to be a statement about a rural strategy, a rural economic strategy to align with the inclusive growth framework. As it is, the inclusive growth framework is not inclusive because it doesn't include any real substantive mention of the rural areas, and I would like that minuted if that's possible.
Did we cover that, Michael?
So, the recommendation that we made to the board was in reflection of that point, and they accepted the recommendation and committed to, I'll have to go back through the exact wording, but committed to trying to take account of that in the future kind of work as the inclusive growth and the economic growth strategy take shape. If you feel I haven't reflected that sufficiently, or those particular comments in the minutes, I'm happy to amend them.
No, I was happy with the conclusion, the statement that was made, but I think there was the justification for the statement was the issue about the rural areas of Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire for that matter.
Okay.
I'm happy to just put in a few words to make that point in the minute.
I'd be very grateful.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Thank you.
Okay, with that exception, we're okay with the minutes from the previous meeting. David, if you'll work with this David and Michael, sorry, and so many names. If you work with Michael to make that read as you wish, as you see fit, according to what we discussed, that would be good. Okay. So. Obviously, members of the public are entitled to attend this meeting and ask questions, but I understand we've not had any notice of questions and we don't have any members of the public in attendance at this moment in time. So we don't have to refer to the limitations on the time that they're available, that is available to members. So we can move on with the agenda to item 5. And the first report that we need to consider is in relation to the Transport Investment Programme. And I think that's yourself. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the paper today is to update committee on the development of the next phase of the Transport Investment Programme. So just bear with me. So we're looking to inform committee of the work that's been undertaken so far in developing the programme, the actions to develop that next phase, so how we're progressing to having a defined programme that can start delivery, but also looking for committee's advice on any improvements or any suggestions that may then feed into that next phase of development. Just to outline the sort of the framework with which we're delivering, the main objective we've got for the development process is to be in a position by the 1st of April to start implementation. The significant funding that was made available to us following the comprehensive spending review earlier this year goes live from the 1st of April. It's a 6-year settlement, which is a considerable amount of time to have knowledge and foresight of the funding for. But that time can disappear quite quickly. We don't want to lose large chunks of it in the early stages where we could be implementing activities. So we are looking to be in a position to start some work early in the new financial year. The main milestones reached so far and throughout the rest of the process are led through Transport Committee, or Transport and Digital Connectivity Committee, sorry. We presented a paper on the process to get their buy-in and their input into that. That was agreed in early September. We then subsequently went back to committee with some information on priorities and initial programme level allocations that we could start applying to that programme to start refining it into something a bit more detailed. That was at the end of October. And again, that paper was approved through committee, which has led to the information that's in today's paper. Over the course of October and November, we've been looking at the existing pipeline and also other opportunities for new proposals to come forward so we can start building some scheme-specific content to that programme. We are going through the wider committee presentations, so here today and to the Business Advisory Board next week to provide the same information to them that we're sharing with you today. We have arranged an informal member workshop with the Transport Committee members in early December to enable us to talk in more detail about some of those specific proposals, the pros and the cons and the different opportunities there are within those. There wouldn't be enough time within a formal committee to really go into that level of detail to be able to discuss. So that's why we've done it as a separate session outside of the normal committee framework. Following that, the intention is to use the output from that work to then lead us to a more detailed programme, an itemised list that can then go through the formal approval process through January, February and March next year, with a view to MCA board signing off in March, which puts us in that position to commence delivery in April. The overview of the funding programme, so just give a bit of clarity to what it is we're working with. There's been a significant change into how transport funding is administered for the region with the creation of EMCCA a lot of allocations that would previously have gone to the individual constituent authorities, or the highway authorities specifically, are now coming through to EMCCA. The award that we had, that was announced in the spending review, excuse me, consisted of a number of existing awards, so highways maintenance funding, integrated transport funding, and bus services capital funding, were all subsumed into a single pot that was then supplemented with a significant additional allocation, and that's what created the Transport for City Regions Award for East Midlands of 2.038 billion. There are some parameters to what we need to do with this money. We do obviously need to use this to deliver against the regional objectives, and that's not solely based in transport alone. That's recognising the work that's come out of the Growth Commission. We have our Emerging Mayors Transport Plan, for which the consultation process was launched earlier this week. We also need to recognise existing local plans that may be within the individual authorities to make sure that the work that we do with this funding is driving those pre-agreed strategic objectives. There are also some objectives that are defined by DFT, the funding body. I've summarised those there, and that the funding needs to be used to support growth and productivity through integrated transport. It's to support the delivery of new homes and improving access to opportunity, but also looking to decarbonise transport as well. So those are the three headline objectives from the Department for Transport. In terms of specific criteria for what we can do with the money, it covers all local transport, so there's no specific area that is excluded. It needs to cover from the smallest, a few £1,000s, very local intervention, through to those many millions of pounds of strategic transformational investments in the region. There is a mix of capital and revenue, but it is predominantly capital funding, so it is about building that infrastructure or improving that infrastructure. The revenue that we have is specifically for developing capacity and capability, which really comes down to developing the business cases and the understanding of what those schemes could be, but also the resources to enable us to deliver those. We can't use it for service delivery, so it's not a pot of funding that we can use to supplement bus services or fare schemes or anything like that. Outside of TCR, we are still anticipating a separate allocation from the Department for Transport for next year that could be used for those things. So it's not that we're not going to be able to do them, just not through the money that we're talking about today that we currently have knowledge of. As I mentioned, a 6-year forecast is an enormous change, and it's probably as significant as the scale of funding that we've got. For a number of years, authorities have been working very much on shorter-term funding settlements, often year to year, which does limit the opportunity to plan ahead. It's difficult to commit to a scheme if you don't have the certainty of funding beyond the next 12 months. So this is an opportunity for us to establish those pipeline options, things that we can deliver later on in this 6-year programme. There are some exclusions. It's for, in DFT parlance, local infrastructure, not national infrastructure. So we couldn't use it to reopen rail lines or put down new railway track. We can, however, use the revenue element to help develop the business cases for those, so that we can then be making that case back to government for those investments to be funded through another forum. There is a cap on the amount of money that can be used for what is classed as new road infrastructure, and that is 10% of the total capital award, which over the course of the 6 years is circa £190 million. There is an ongoing discussion between ourselves and DFT around exactly what constitutes new road infrastructure. Something, an entirely new piece of highway is very clearly new road infrastructure, but where does a junction improvement become something that is classed as new? So there is an element of definition that we still need to get out of that, but it is very clear that while road building is permitted, it's not seen as a priority from the department's point of view. Receiving this funding doesn't then exclude us from other funding pots that may become available. So as a recipient of TCR, we are still entitled to bid into other government programmes, such as the current live Major Route Network programme. One of the important things to understand when we were getting this award was what would that potentially leave us out of? And it's been very clear from DFT that we know those other pots of funding are still available to us. Where we are at the moment, so as I mentioned, this has been managed through Transport Committee. We have agreed at the October meeting to some baseline allocations, and that is the continuation of those subsumed allocations. So it's identified in the paper as 75.7 million per year for the next 3 years for highways maintenance, 12.8 million per year for what was previously called integrated transport block, and that is the smaller scale, very community and neighbourhood based investment. So it's your accessibility to local health centre, signal improvements, local road safety schemes, that kind of activity. We also agreed to continuing as a minimum level of capital allocation for bus capital infrastructure. So the £21 million that was subsumed into the pot, we're still ring-fencing that to be spent specifically on bus infrastructure. We also agreed to a commitment to the strategic pipeline. The funding profiles, the payment schedule from DFT increases significantly over the 6 years. It's not 6 even instalments. It starts at £184 million next year, rising to, I think it's 434 by year 6. So it's clearly a very significant spike in terms of the scale of funding. That fits well with the position we're in not having a significant capital pipeline ready to go, but having the revenue resource within this programme to enable us to build that over the next 2 to 3 years, so that at the back end of the programme we are in a position for delivering larger scale, more transformational capital infrastructure in line with that funding envelope. So that was one of the agreements from Transport Committee. Project sponsors from across the region are actually working up investment proposals to feed into the assessment and prioritisation process. We are leading that primarily through the highway authorities, as those are the authorities that are responsible and own that highway network, and so any activity on the transport network obviously needs to include them. As I mentioned previously, we have a member workshop in a couple of weeks' time to start reviewing those specific submissions and to be able to discuss those in more detail and agree collectively which are the immediate priorities, which maybe are schemes that we want to look at a little bit further down the line. Depending on the total level of allocation that comes forward, we'll also be discussing opportunities for adding more into the maintenance and the local neighbourhood infrastructure early on. That was one of the items that came out of the last Transport Committee, is that baseline allocation is good, but it's maybe not the minimum or the amount that we want to be spending at the moment. There's an opportunity, certainly in these early years, for us to invest a bit more, get some delivery on the ground quite quickly that shows that quick return and that immediate impact whilst we're building that longer term pipeline plan. We are at this stage focusing on the early years of the settlement, so we're not looking to try and get a fully itemised 6-year programme. There's a number of changes that are going to happen that will influence that, not just in the development of the business cases and those pipeline options, but our Mayor's Transport Plan is still in the consultation phase. It's not going to be fully adopted until next year, and we need to be able to respond and react to that as it goes through the consultation process. There will be changes, and we need to make sure that we haven't put ourselves into a corner where we've got a programme we've committed to that doesn't quite align. There is obviously the question of local government reform and what that may mean for the structures in the region, and so we're not in a rush to try and get out all 6 years worth of funding allocated. We're taking a more measured approach and looking at the early years. That will be led by the output from that workshop, and then, like I say, the formal approval to be completed at the end of Q1 2026, so that we're in a position to then start delivery from April. That doesn't then mean, excuse me, no future opportunities. There will obviously be a recurring need to revisit and review that programme and on a regular basis make sure that any new opportunities that have come up, any new proposals that have come forward, still have the opportunity to be considered. So that's the presentation and the information on the pipeline and the programme development process.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for that run through. We've all got the papers as well, and we've had informal discussions around these issues in the past as a committee, and obviously something that there's a lot of interest in, and not least the interest in the members' workshop in December, when you're first considering some of the potential projects that you're going to be looking at. And I think we've agreed that we can sit in on that, get somebody to sit on that and observe what the process is there, which will be good, because then we can feed back into this committee. Because in terms of spend, this is one of the areas where it's going to come forward most quickly. Yeah, and we're looking to that. So I'm going to come for questions. Andy, you.
To put myself forward for the workshop, my background is civil engineering, 25 years, highways, and highway, all things to do with highways, planning and delivery. I suppose it's just a few comments. It's and they're sort of general comments that it's a challenge to EMCCA that if we just kind of do the same thing as what was being done, being devolved down, we're not going to change anything. And that's why you're kind of looking at, I know we're in a transition stage, but it just seems like we're just passporting down. So that's one thing around the challenge about how we can do things differently. I think the point we've made at previous meetings about the flow of information down from EMCCA policy through the existing constituent authorities, the county being a major delivery of, well, the county and some of the cities, but my experience is around the county, that flow it hasn't historically flowed that well. I've sort of made inquiries with regard to our own area for our local transport policy and our local plan, and you know, you go back to 2021 before there's any kind of recent communication. You know, so I'm really concerned about emphasising via EMCCA that they've really got to reach out to all the districts in Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire to make sure that they do feed into that. I suppose the maintenance side of it as well, it'd be good to see some more detail that's passed along on that strategy as well. And you spoke about capital spending on bus infrastructure. Could you elaborate a little bit more on what that actually means? Because once you put things into, assigned them to different activities, you're kind of scratching your head and going, right, well, what is new and what are we actually going to change?
Thank you, Andy. Quite a few points in there. Alex, you've got to come back on those. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. So the first point about don't just do the same, I completely understand that. And I think if we use the maintenance funding as the example of how we're not just going to be doing the same, one of the activities that we've got underway with the highways leads from across all 4 of the highways authorities is building a business case to explain in more detail what we're going to do that isn't just going back out with trucks full of tarmac and filling the potholes and then going back again 12 months later and refilling the same potholes. There is a much bigger shift towards preventative maintenance and looking at the work that needs to be done now that provides that longer lasting solution that prevents the regular occurrence of potholes. There is a little challenge in that obviously potholes are the immediate visible thing, and there may be an element of challenge back where there are people coming forward with areas where there are potholes they want addressing, and it's a little bit harder for them to understand why we're investing elsewhere in preventing something that actually will be in 12 months' time a much worse scenario. But we are building that business case, and that will also help provide more visibility as well. So your further point about the maintenance detail, it's not just a case of passporting the funding to the highways authorities and then saying to them, let us know that you've spent it. We will be looking to understand in more detail what's been done, where it's been done, how that programme is being managed, and what the prioritisation processes are, so that there is greater visibility across the whole region of what work is being done with that maintenance funding and what difference is being made. In particular, if we do choose to invest more than the baseline allocation, I think that even adds further need to the justification for why have we not just stuck with the amount DFT had in mind, why have we gone over and above? And I think there is a great opportunity to make some quick differences and some quick positive impacts, but I do completely get a point. It's important that we're not just doing the same stuff over and that there is visibility of that. Your second point around the flow of information from ourselves through to the districts and boroughs is a point that's been raised at Transport Committee. It is an issue that we do understand, and we are looking to increase that communication and get closer engagement with the districts and boroughs. From a point of view of transport specifically, we do still have to be conscious of the fact that the highway authority needs to be part of that process. You and I could have a conversation about a scheme, but it's a scheme that's going to be delivered in Nottinghamshire's highway network, for example, and so we wouldn't want to be excluding those. But we do acknowledge and understand that the process we have at the moment of relying on the county authorities to be that conduit for us isn't providing the level of detail and support that the district and borough levels will be looking for. And so we are working to try and have greater contact and greater understanding of what your needs and your requirements are. And then the final point around bus infrastructure. We are, as a region, we are in the process of developing the first regional bus services improvement plan, but there are 4 existing bus services improvement plans that were generated by the 4 constituent authorities previously. Those have details in terms of the specific capital investments that are intended. Now that is a long-term plan. It's not an annual programme that we can already say, right, this is definitely what's going to come forward for next year. But whatever those capital infrastructure proposals are, will be based on currently those existing bus services improvement plans, and then as we progress to having a regionally adopted one, it will be based on what those are. Now each of those documents has been agreed at the local level through the formal governance and constitutional processes. As an example, I mean, I'm not saying this is exactly what we're going to get next year, but this year's delivery programme consists of a number of allocations looking at electrification of the bus fleet and the depots in particular to enable that to happen. There are some bus prioritisation investments, whether that is signal-based, so enabling better communication between the signals and the buses to make sure that the buses are receiving green lights. There are some road infrastructure ones, so where there will be bus lanes or bus priority infrastructure put out on the highway. But it's that kind of investment that's currently in the bus service delivery plan. And like I say, while that doesn't mean that's exactly what we'll get next year, that's intended just to give you a feel of what kind of work is being done.
Andy, does that address your issues, or do you want to come back on that?
I'll let everyone else have a go now.
Okay, well, I've got Councillor Abbott, Councillor Mabbott indicated.
Hi, yeah, just a couple of comments that I'd just like to make. That the approach seems sound, and the table included at the end of the report sets out the criteria which we'll use to assess the project, so all that seems appropriate. And we'd just like to say that on behalf of DCC, Councillors Wood from Net Zero and Environment and Councillor Hill from Highways would like to attend that 4th of December workshop.
Obviously, that meeting is subject to the committee. Any concerns around the number of people attending to view a witness or whatever?
It's online.
No.
It's online meeting. Is it an online meeting or a?
No, it's an informal meeting, so it's not online. It's not broadcast. It's not got a sort of a formal process. It's more of an opportunity to have a workshop and a discussion. In terms of the numbers, I don't think there'll be an issue in terms of, sort of the facilities, the scale of the room that we've got. I will just need to double check that. I don't want to end up cramming too many people into a room and creating a hazard, but I'm confident there'll be enough room.
Where is it being held?
It's being held at County Hall in Derbyshire, in Matlock.
Okay.
I think they are invited.
Right.
Okay.
So can I just double check in? Councillor Wood and Councillor Hill.
She is the
Right.
cabinet member.
Okay. Yes. In that case, they are both as Transport Committee members. They've already been invited to the workshop.
Okay. Good. Councillor Brennan, I think, was next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really just building on Mayor Abraham's point, because I was going to ask about communication with districts and boroughs in terms of identifying priorities. So I suppose in the spirit of scrutinising it, you're talking about having a member workshop imminently to agree those priorities. So, and you've acknowledged there was something of a deficit of communication between the highways authorities and the boroughs and districts in the run-up to this. So how are we going to ensure when this first plan is, the priorities are put together, that issue of a deficit of communication with the boroughs and districts has been addressed? Otherwise, we're always going to be playing catch-up.
Can I just interject here, because I've got a note here from DCC that have said they are reaching out to Derbyshire District and boroughs to encourage views to be fed through. So that was a note from DCC.
I'm very pleased to hear it, but it doesn't help me in Nottinghamshire.
Yeah, that's true.
We had a session couple of weeks ago that had come out of the last Transport Committee when Councillor Elf from Ashfield had raised the same point, and he invited a number of the other districts and boroughs from the Nottinghamshire area where we did talk through the process, the opportunity, and we have started to receive proposals off the back of that. So that acknowledgement of a longer-term need to have stronger engagement with the district and boroughs isn't necessarily going to be perfectly resolved by December the 4th, but we have already opened that communication channel. There was an open opportunity and an invitation that was sent out to some in the region of 25 different members and officers from across the Nottinghamshire authorities, Nottinghamshire districts and boroughs, to enable input into that. Off the back of that, I've had a couple of direct approaches from different representatives from across the region to go and talk to them individually, people who weren't available to attend that session. So we are making sure that that opportunity is being opened. I did also want to sort of reiterate, while we are setting the process now, I talked about the fact this is looking at the next 2 to 3 years, that's not closing off the next 2 to 3 years. And so as we talk further, if opportunities or proposals come forward early next year, it's not a closed book. There will still be that opportunity for us to periodically go back and add things into the programme to adapt and monitor and change the programme to any suitable proposals that come forward.
Thank you. Just briefly, I won't extend it, but we don't know where the boroughs and we do know where the boroughs and district council is going to be in 2 years, so it might be a little bit late by then. So, for example, we've been looking at investment in the Bingham Railway footbridge, which I hope is going to be put into the thinking for the preparation of this strategy. But the fact is, if we're going to wait 2 years before we ask the boroughs and districts, then we won't be here to be asked.
Sorry, that wasn't what I meant with what I was saying before. We're not saying we're going to wait that long to talk to the districts and boroughs. Those conversations have already opened, and with obviously that reference to Bingham Railway Station, that did come up in the conversation a couple of weeks ago in Ashfield. You're right about we don't know where we're going to land in 2 to 3 years with the local government reform. To a degree, I've consciously turned a bit of a blind eye to that. We know what we know at the moment. We know what the structure is, and that's the structure that we're trying to work with, rather than trying to anticipate what it might be in 3 years' time and then possibly get that wrong. So there's certainly no intention to wait until that happens to then worry about whether or not we've engaged properly with the districts and boroughs.
Okay, good. I've got Councillor Hughes and then Councillor Gillett.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd certainly thank you for reaching out to the districts and boroughs, because I think that is a real issue, particularly on local plan development, where as a district, we've already had conversations along those lines. So we welcome those conversations, and they were excellent. Can I just suggest that this approach is adopted more generally? I was reading the funding for brownfield sites. And I had a conversation with the officer who is responsible for that sort of investment in Derbyshire Dales, and he didn't know who to contact in EMCCA, and EMCCA hadn't reached out to him, so he wasn't aware of the brownfield site programme at all. So I think thank you very much for doing it in transport. It's great, and can we just generalise that? On transport, there's an issue, I think, about micro or very local transport and inter-regional transport. I expect that the transport policy will readily address the cities and larger towns, but there is, of course, the issue of getting to towns from villages, and then into regional communication. So, for example, Chesterfield to Sheffield, which is probably there's a proposal from Sheffield to develop a tramway or extend the tramway to Sheffield. So there are some interesting issues that may involve you as well as Sheffield in that respect, and there's then also the issue about getting from a village to a town and then getting back in a reasonable amount of time. So thank you.
Okay, Alex, I understand, as with major rail infrastructure, the tram infrastructure is not within this funding.
Tram infrastructure would be eligible, so that's classed as local infrastructure. So if we did progress a business case and reached a point where we wanted to extend the tram network, then that would be eligible for this funding. There'd be a question over whether or not there's a capacity within a fund this size to deliver that, but that's for the business case and the programme profile to answer over a protracted period of time. So yes, tram investment would be that classes as local infrastructure. Heavy rail would class as national infrastructure. You then do have a little bit of a grey area using the technology that was developed in South Yorkshire for tram train. You know, how does that fit into that? But I won't try and answer that today. Just with regards to your questions about or your points about the sort of policy and rural accessibility and inter-regional, refer back to a comment earlier on around the Mayor's Transport Plan. The consultation process for that was launched on Monday. That is the forum through which those opinions, those needs and those questions across. It's a public consultation, it's not just for officers and members, but certainly they're not trying to anticipate the outcome of that process, but that's where we would look to understand in more detail what those needs, what those wishes are, and accommodate those into the strategic framework that ultimately come from the Mayor's Transport Plan.
Get it.
I had 3 points and David's raised them all, but I'll just follow them up a little bit. Just to emphasise the theme that's obviously developed from the districts and boroughs and their involvement. And my experience isn't to do with transport, it's to do with other areas. But I've seen at least 2 grants involving millions of pounds being awarded to projects in the district I represent. And the first the officers at the district knew about it was when I went in and said, I've read it in the Scrutiny papers. And that just doesn't feel right, because they've got knowledge and experience about those sites that may not have changed the decision, but should have been put into the mix, I think. So I'm pleased to hear that problem has been recognised and hopefully will be addressed across the board and not just with transport issues. The rurality issue, I think, is a big issue. Well, I represent what I think is a rural area, certainly compared to my colleagues from the cities, compared to where David comes from. He probably says, I don't represent a rural area. But there is a danger that when you want early successes to benefit the most people and get the most out of it, you'll go to the bigger areas, and the sort of rural communities will miss out. And so it's how you will make sure that they get their fair share of the funding, as it were, to make a difference to those communities. And obviously, the further north you come, I think, as David has emphasised, we tend not to look to Derby or to Nottingham. We tend to look either to the northwest and to Sheffield, and that involves other mayors, and that just adds this extra dimension to it, which could make things too difficult to do. And you've outlined, I think, some of the problems because the funding doesn't touch those. But the transformational issues around here would be things like the tram. And it's how we make sure that they aren't put on the too difficult to do pile as we try and do the stuff that we can do to make the quick, big bang difference, as it were.
Thank you again for reiterating the point about the districts and borough engagement. And with regards to the rural needs, one of the elements of the funding is it's for all local transport, but it is for the whole region as well. And we've got a task to make sure that while you're right, it could be easy to say, well, where's it going to have the most impact on the most people? Let's just go for the most densely populated areas. But our mayor has been very clear for a long time that we have an equal responsibility to those rural areas, that we don't want to exacerbate that sort of difference and say, right, okay, we're just going to focus where the most people are. We haven't got, obviously, a programme profile at the moment, but when we do have that, one of the things we'll be testing for is the geography of those, to make sure, for argument's sake, the maintenance allocations are recognising the need to address the rural highway as well. That those smaller community-based investments, they're not all around the villages or the suburban areas around the city centres. It does recognise the fact that we need to get out into the whole area. So I can't give any sort of specifics in terms of this is what geographically it will look like, but just to reassure you, we do clearly recognise the need for supporting the rural communities, and they're not a second thought in this process. With regards to that, looking to Sheffield and those other neighbouring authorities, you're absolutely right. And I wouldn't want to pin too much on sort of individual relationships, but we do have a very strong relationship with Sheffield. I worked there for a number of years, and so the officers involved in those cross-boundary issues are people I've worked with for a long time. It's very easy to create that contact and to do that. But we also need to be looking at all the other areas. You're right, there's a big movement of people from Chesterfield up into Sheffield, but there's also those movements across to Manchester in the northeast. We've got to look to Greater Lincolnshire and to the West Midlands. So that need for having those strong relationships with our neighbouring authorities, our neighbouring MCAs and local authorities is well recognised, and where I can personally take advantage of existing relationships, we also need to be doing the same with all of those neighbouring areas. Now, as somebody travelling on the network, you don't care that you've just moved from an East Midlands road to a South Yorkshire road. That's irrelevant, and our job as officers in this process is to recognise that.
Okay, you want to come back, Andy?
Yes, please. I'm looking at the themes and the priorities, and you said something about, well, we can't do it, we can't invest in improving service delivery, like timetabling. So when I read what it says, you know, it says bring public transport nearer to people, improve reliability, journey times and frequencies, you know, or enhance passenger experience, linking between the two. You just can't get away from the fact that if we're going out to public consultation, they just say, I want more frequent buses. I want them to run after 5 o'clock at night. You know, so I think the messaging that we've got there, it kind of comes across as misleading, really. And we should be saying, what are we going to do to try and achieve that? And I think that's also when all the questions around the strategic, like for rail or tram, because you said, well, not rail or tram, well, around Nottinghamshire, potentially it could be, a tram line and a rail line, could swap on different lines, whatever. So I think we need something where you actually set out these larger strategic ambitions in relation to the Department of Transport and on that service delivery. The thing around, you said, well, electrification of buses, but a lot of them are private, run by private. So how does that work? So there's a lot of things around the words that don't actually seem possible to deliver.
Okay. Alex?
The Mayor's Transport Plan, so where those policies and those priorities are coming from, is entirely fund agnostic. That is about what we need to do strategically as a region. The limitations that I've talked about are based on the funding that we have available that we know today. So where you've talked about the need for service improvements, deliveries, absolutely, and we would, again, not preempting the outcome of the consultation, but I'd be very surprised if that wasn't right at the front of it in terms of people's needs and people's wishes. The bus revenue funding that we don't currently know for next year would be where we'd be looking to support that from. So all the things that are outlined in there are things that we are proposing at this point. They should be priorities, or these are the priorities we need to be discussing. Any limitation that I referred to today is just specifically the pot of funding, transport for city regions, and what that can and can't be used for. But that doesn't mean that that's all we want to do. It is a big pot of money. Obviously, it gets a lot of attention, but I think it's important to keep making those points that there are other things that we need to do that will be funded elsewhere that are part of that overall strategic plan rather than a particular funding stream.
Okay, Edward, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so just to supplement a little bit of what Alex has said, in terms of that issue around how can we try and use the money we've got available to impact on things like bus services, the example of, services in the evening, for example. Alex has mentioned the bus grant, or I still call it BSIP revenue, but I must call it bus grant. The second area is we can potentially try and deploy our capital in a way that delivers a revenue benefit for the operators. So, for example, improvements to the physical network, improvement to the customer experience, which will drive patronage, which will increase revenues, which will then give them more money to hopefully give better and expanded services. There is even things like, this is just an idea, I'm not saying it's a commitment, but can we do clever things like spend the capital on electric buses and lease them back to the operators? So that then saves them money that they can then plough back into services. So we've got to be really cute about the fact that we've got a big block of capital, but we want to have an impact on revenue. How do we use that capital in the ways that is as clever as we can? And then in the long term, and again, this is this is medium to long term. We are trying to engage with government about increased capital revenue flexibility. So we've applied for established status, which would start us down the path moving towards an integrated settlement as a combined authority. So rather than lots of different funding streams, the ultimate idea would be that we move towards more of a single pot approach. That's what West Midlands and Greater Manchester are working with government on at the moment. And as part of that, we would have some flexibility, not infinite flexibility, but some more flexibility between capital and revenue. So again, that's not a silver bullet, it's not on the horizon right yet, but it is exactly what we're aiming to for those sorts of issues. And I've got a meeting with DFT on the 10th and 11th of December where we'll be talking about that.
Okay. It feels to me that having received the reassurances in relation to consultations with rural areas, rural district councils and things, feels like that we as a committee can endorse that approach. Whereas it seems with the brownfield sites funding that was allocated, it was done quickly and apparently without so much consultation with local districts. Does it feel that we can make a recommendation to the board that the approach that's been adopted with this transport plan should be adopted across the committees and the funding pots that will come forward in the future? That yes, Abby.
Well, if it's going to be improved, I wouldn't want, I mean, some of us have expressed already that we don't feel that it's been good enough this time, so I wouldn't want to see it as simply just another not very good enough process replicated for brownfield or across the whole gamut of initiatives. So if we can make the improvements that Alex suggested and apply them to all areas of development and funding, then yes.
Okay, take your point, absolutely. Yes, Andy.
Not wanting to, it always seems like a moan, but we've just had the Mayor's programme for going around for the consultation. That equally wasn't communicated to the last minute. We're saying we want something that's done. And if it's a true public consultation, if you can't tell the areas where the Mayor's going and where she's going to speak, then you're not consulting with the public. You're missing a massive opportunity. So we were the first place, and it didn't happen such that we were informed. We found out by accident on the Friday before, and so there weren't no public really involved.
So I mean, consultation is a theme that keeps coming up with us in term, and I think it's accepted by the administration that there are issues around communication, not just with the public, but also as far back as the local councils, district councils, and indeed the city councils to inform the members there to be able to passport the information about the good work and the funding that the EMCCA have got. But so we can agree with that qualification from Abby. We can agree a recommendation in relation to communication with rural areas. Yeah.
I'll craft some words and I'll.
Circulate.
Do you think we can get it to the board for this Monday? That's going to be a bit of a. Yeah, so it'll have to go to the next board, which then gives me time to make sure that you're happy with the recommendation that we'll make. Okay. But it'll be using the good work that Alex and his team are doing, but recognising it can be improved, but urging all areas of strategy development to follow that model really. So I'll cross some words, circulate it, and we'll get it to the next board.
Okay. Just before we finish, Alex, one thing that I think we've had discussions about before, I guess it comes back to doing the same issue in terms of passporting the highways maintenance and what was the integrated block back to districts and the bus funding as well. My concern is around what appears to me to be a little bit of a hiatus in terms of what would have been from the integrated block before for local transport plans. Obviously trying to develop a regional one, but each and every authority, particularly constituent authorities, had their own local plans. And I'm talking about, we need a new crossing here to supplement the school crossing patrol, or you need some double yellow lines on this street. And for me, it appears that work is almost stopped, because of the work that's going on to build in, to bid into what the combined authority can supply. What's your thoughts on that?
Couple of points around that. You'd like each authority has their own existing local transport plan, and we've just been talking about the development of that regional mayor's transport plan. That's not ready for full adoption yet. In the interim, we've agreed with the Department for Transport that those existing local plans stay relevant, and they should still be the structure against which those local investments are done. In terms of the funding, that IT block funding was the one discretionary pot of funding that was available to deal with those smaller scale investments, and that's one of the reasons why one of the proposals we put into the paper was that should, as an absolute minimum, continue at the current value, because those activities do need to carry on. There shouldn't be a stall or a delay in those because of the changing structure of the strategic plans behind them. So while we are not at this point monitoring the delivery of those in the level of detail where I can give you numbers or outcomes from what's been done this year, we are reassured from the spend profile that we're getting back from the local authorities that they're continuing to deliver against those, the local highway authorities, that they're continuing to deliver against those allocations. As part of the development of this programme, we will look for more transparency in terms of what's been done with that. So when we're allocating the TCR funding and people are starting to deliver against it, we will want to know more about what is it that has gone on in the communities. Now, where have you done the yellow lines? How many of these small scale junction improvements have you done? So there is greater transparency, but I do still see that the need for discretion within the local authorities to own and be responsible for what that profile remains. Centrally, we're not in a position to tell you that that particular community needs 2 drop crossings outside the health centre. I think that's the kind of intelligence that the local authority should still have responsibility for. Our job is just to make sure that the funding is available for that to continue. I've always been quite an advocate of the IT block and the value of those small interventions. You put all those together and they make a massive difference to people's day-to-day journeys. They have the most immediate impact on how people are travelling, and certainly there's no will or intention to marginalise that within the context of a greater pot of funding.
So if the funding's still there and there's been a reduction or a slowing of delivery of those priorities, local priorities, then presumably that's down to resources. And is there a drain on resources for the constituent authorities in the work that they're having to do towards EMCCA's plans?
It is essentially the same people who will be delivering those local programmes that are also supporting us in the development of the larger programmes. The revenue funding that we've got as part of this, though, does give us the opportunity to increase those resources, and by we I mean all the region, not just EMCCA. And so while there may be at the moment a challenge of delivering and preparing for the future programmes, the resource funding that we have does give us the capacity to resolve that problem.
You still need the relevant officers in a position to be able to do with the extra work, don't they? Councillor Brennan indicated, then I'll bring you in.
Thank you. Actually, it's just going back to the point about our recommendation not being able to go to the next board. So does that apply to all the recommendations that we might make today? Because I thought we talked about this timing issue before. Are all the recommendations from today's Scrutiny Committee not going to go to the board, they're going to go to the one after?
That's a hard question to answer. I'm looking to my
perhaps Catherine can guide us on that.
It's just practically, a paper needs to be written, it needs to be okayed by everybody. It's a practical issue, not a kind of a general issue or a permanent issue, let's say. It's just we've got one working day to get something out, and that's just not practicable, I would argue.
Make a verbal report on recommendations to one board because we couldn't get papers out. I mean, it's otherwise it's not time. I mean, the timing. When's the next board after? So anything we discuss today is going to be months ahead before they consider our recommendations.
So the next meeting is 26th of January.
Well, point then.
So its relevance is lost, isn't it? If it's not reported.
But I would argue this is the delay shouldn't matter in this instance, in this recommendation, because we're talking about all the whole work, you know, the different strategy developments working through. So it won't be lost, and it's not specific to transport. In this case, we're saying that transport is a kind of an exemplar, albeit that needs improvement.
Yeah, but if it were, it still wouldn't be going to the board until January.
But it's still a message that needs to get to the board, so it's better to do it than not do it, surely.
It's timely to do it as soon as. Catherine, any thoughts on it?
Thank you, Chair. So there is obviously a board cycle, as Michael has indicated. The timing of this meeting is very close to board. So board is Monday of next week. So that doesn't leave us any time to publish a paper which will contain the recommendations in the statutory time period that we need to have before that board. I think what I'm hearing from the floor, perhaps, Chair, is that there is a recommendation to consider the timing of meetings so that reports and recommendations from overview and scrutiny can be considered at the earliest possible opportunity. And that is something which obviously, again, I'm sure all parties in the room will understand there are a lot of moving parts to the EMCCA calendar. You all have a lot of your own meetings. We do seek to ensure that as many members as possible can be at those meetings, as well as the mayor, as well as those officers who need to be, and those members who need to be. But I think it is a really valid point, and I think that it is one that I think we can hear and take back to the senior leadership team within EMCCA to make those points. I would also say, and I'll perhaps hand over to Edward on this point, is that it would not stop the work that is necessary in order to make that happen after the board would hopefully approve that recommendation from going ahead, so that as soon as that authority is given, things can be implemented. And I'm really absolutely certain that Edward has heard that message. So if that helps,
I guess the importance of this is that it goes to the core of what this committee is about, and we need, you know, if we come up with there are recommendations we need to receive issue, then we need to receive a response, and it needs to go in a timely fashion before the board. And we've had issues around how we do that in the past, so we need to resolve this. And I think you're right. I think it might be about the timing of this meeting in relation to the board meeting, to give us more time to be able to write it up and get it there and get it in front of. But that's about timely reports as well, isn't it? It's if the reports that are going to the board that we scrutinise aren't issued on a timely manner, then they're not ready for us to scrutinise either. So it's a balancing thing. I think it's a learning curve. You want to come in, Edward?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to offer two comments, if I may. One was about this, and it was just that point Catherine's made. So, I mean, I think that there's perhaps a little bit of detail about who knew what when on consultation programmes, who knew not when on brownfield housing. That's not the point. I don't want to be defensive about it. The point around working better, get that line of communication better with district and borough councils has been well made and heard loud and clear. I was just going to make the point that I mean, you know, Richard and I are on the leadership team at EMCCA. I'm seeing the chief exec this afternoon. We will talk about it. We will make steps to strengthen that communication. We won't wait for the formal recommendation to January to do that. It's just good common sense. We will get on with that straight away. So just to give you a bit of reassurance that we will take that away straight away.
Okay.
And if I may, the other comment was on the local schemes and the potential hiatus. What is back to the 6-year funding. Whilst we haven't said 6 years of certainty, what we have said is the minimum levels for 3 years. Because I know, you know, up until 5 months ago, I was in a local authority running teams like this and being told in January, February that you've got 12 months more funding, but you're expected to hit the ground running from the 1st of April is really difficult to manage workload and manage staff. Knowing you've got 3 years hopefully allows you to recruit, to plan, to have some certainty. So that's why we thought that minimum provision, because we can always increase it, but giving people certainty over a 3-year period allows them hopefully to, as I say, plan more strategically, get the resources they need, and avoid this stop-start, on-off uncertainty that has plagued the system for a long time.
Absolutely. Local authorities would love 3 years budgeting to be able to work with in the first place. I think, Kevin, you were first.
The cycle of meetings is really key, I think, because otherwise it means we're wasting our time. Perhaps not so much with this issue, but the next two items on the agenda are on the board next week. So if we come up with some recommendations today, for argument's sake, and we can't formally agree them to get them to board until January, but the board's discussing them next week, what's the point?
Richard, come first.
So, to recognise that point, and specifically in relation to the budget, which is the next item, I did have written into the budget papers that are coming forward to you today, and also are going to the board on Monday, that any substantive comments that you make today, I will verbally feed back to the board on Monday.
That's what we wanted to do with this topic. I don't think it's something to resolve today. I think it's highlighted a problem that people need to go away and think about and proper working solution rather than ad hoc arrangements.
In terms of the timings, yes. Andy, did you want to add anything?
Well, yeah, it's 2 points. We did this 9 months ago when we said, you know, one overview and scrutiny committee got cancelled and things got passed at board level, and there were lots of communications saying, you know, we can't let this happen again, but we've had a new timetable that's resulted in exactly the same thing. So I know we're having the conversation again, but there was a lot of information saying, well, this can't be right, let's sort it out, and it didn't happen. So you know, I know we're emphasising the same point, but it feels a bit like Groundhog Day because we're saying the same thing.
Okay. That meeting was cancelled because of chorus, I think, wasn't it?
It was, but it was the same point though. There still wasn't enough time for you know, it's still the same issue which we raised last year, and we haven't changed it. With regard to...
It's a vitally important point in that, you know, we are the scrutiny board for the whole of EMCCA and all the committees that goes with it. So we need the opportunity to be able to feed back and expect a response to any recommendations that comes forward. So,
and it's the motivation of the, you know, everyone, you're reading all the papers, you know, time moves on.
I get that. I think we made the point.
Yeah, made the point. Back to the other point about the smaller schemes, and it's definitely the responsibility of each district or area. But I think the EMCCA might have a role in, you know, I used the example before where in our particular area, but you could look at the 2011 plan and say, well, none of those things have been done. So there's not been that scrutiny that's flowed through. So there is an opportunity via the reports that the highway authorities have to give back through the flow line that EMCCA can have a role in that will then enable us to kind of see whether they've actually delivered. So that's my
Alex,
suggestion.
do you want to come back on that and just re-emphasise the point that you do call on constituent authorities to explain their spend, if you like?
Just to come back to agree, yeah, I think there is an opportunity for us to do that, and as part of we're talking today about the programme development, but we're also responsible for the programme monitoring and the delivery of it, and as part of that we do want to capture a lot more information about what's happening out on the ground to be able to demonstrate that back to the people we're accountable to in terms of DFT, but also to celebrate the work that we're doing as well. It's not a punitive thing, it's putting a spotlight on all the work that's been done. So yes, absolutely, we would want to enhance and have a much more detailed monitoring and reporting capacity.
Okay. Councillor Hughes, and then I'm going to move on to the next item.
Just a comment, really. Thank you on that. The county councils will already be monitoring what their spend, and they will be reporting that to council, their own councils. I'm a little concerned that we might be duplicating activity here, and I'd want to avoid that because that is duplication is a cost, and we clearly want to avoid that. There is one final thing, but it's not about money, but it's about, I was thinking about harmonisation of transport policies across the region, and whether EMCCA believes it has a role there. The example I have is that in Nottinghamshire, there are 20-mile-an-hour limits. Certainly in Nottingham there are 20-mile-an-hour limits. There are very few in Derbyshire, and it's really not Derbyshire policy. So there are slight policy differences between the two constituent counties and cities.
Alex, thoughts on that?
With regards to the first point about risk of duplication and monitoring, very sensitive to that. Now, the officers that we work with, I don't want to be asking them to do a slightly different version of a report they've already done, but in a different way and in a different format. So as part of building that monitoring regime, very much focus on what information is already being gathered, what is out there that can be shared with us that we can then use to create a regional picture. So I'm very aware of the need to not create another industry in monitoring and reporting. In terms of that harmonisation, I think the development of the MTP is the opportunity to raise those points again and to look to how we can maybe start to get that harmonisation. Like you say, you're using that example of 20 mile per hour zones that are quite prevalent in one area and not really applicable elsewhere. There will always be some differences in a region like ours where there is very, very different geographies and demographics. But the opportunity is there through the MTP to start looking at how do we create a more consistent approach to things? How do we have those policies that do actually start to smooth out those variations?
Okay, that rounds that off. I think I could use a comfort break. I don't know about anybody else. Can we take 5 minutes to have a break and get a drink if we need one? Is that okay? Thank you. Okay, thanks for that short break. I think it was certainly valued by me. We're going to move on to item 6, which is the initial, and it is an initial draft budget for 26-27, and also consideration of the medium-term financial plan between 26 and 31. I think, Richard, you're going to lead us through that.
I am going to read you through, and I'm going to do that by way of a presentation, if that's okay with colleagues. Hopefully, with technology, we can patch that through. So, thank you, Chair. So, first of all, what's the context in which we're presenting this paper? So it's very much a draft budget. We're very early in the budget cycle, but we think it's good practice to present a draft budget well ahead of final budget setting, to give the opportunity to engage ahead of final budget setting, including with, of course, the Scrutiny Committee. In terms of the overall, and obviously there's lots of detail in the papers, so just pulling out some highlights. Sorry, that's gone. Sorry. Pulling out some highlights there. It's an increase in gross expenditure for EMCCA from 163 million to 206 million for 26-27 compared to 25-26. And that's mainly because of public transport transfer. So as you're probably all aware, the 4 constituent authorities, Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Derby City and Nottingham City, are currently the public transport authorities for their respective areas. That becomes a regional function from the 1st of April next year. So EMCCA is the regional public transport authority. On the capital side, we're anticipating a capital programme at least 232 million. I think it's going to go up, but at this draft stage, it's around 232 million. So a very significant amount of capital investment for the year. And as you'll see in the papers, that capital profile increases each year, not least because of the transport funding, capital funding that colleagues outlined a little bit earlier. It is an initial draft because we're making this ahead of, or publishing this ahead of further expected revenue and capital announcements from government. So for example, we're not able to reflect anything that comes out of the UK budget, and that's obviously not scheduled till next Wednesday. So that may have some implications for our budget figures. We're expecting some further departmental announcements, including from the Department for Transport on the bus grant, which Edward referenced, and of course the local government finance settlement, which is always very, very close to Christmas. We then will be looking to set the final budget on the 26th of January 26, and that includes setting the public transport contribution, or the levy, to constituent councils for 26-27. So just to elaborate on that point, the 4 councils are currently delivering public transport. That comes to EMCCA. Obviously, they have the funding in their budgets for that public transport provision. So the statute is that we set a levy, which then charges those constituent authorities a sum of money, which is payable to EMCCA for the provision of those services on a regional basis. In terms of what the papers cover, what you have in front of you is a draft revenue budget, as I say, for next year, and then a medium-term financial plan up to 31. A capital programme over 5 years. So it's not the full 6 years of the transport settlement, just the first 5 years of it. Sets out our forecast reserves position for both revenue and capital. And also in the covering report, my Section 25 statement in draft, just to again explain that a bit further. As Section 73 officer, which in combined authority language is the same as the Section 151 officer role within local authorities, I'm obliged to set a statement as to whether I believe that the budget represents the fact that we've both got the robust estimates of expenditure and income, and also adequate reserves to manage the authority. I put that statement in draft form. Obviously, I'll update it prior to final publication. We've also got, as a second part of the paper, but I'll take these with your permission, Chair, together, the draft mayoral budget for the year. That's separate only because there are different voting arrangements at the board. In relation to the main EMCA budget, it's a simple majority at the board. In relation to the mayoral budget, it's a 2/3 majority. Okay, I shall move on just to highlight the main changes. This is on the revenue side of the budget, so the day-to-day expenditure. The biggest single change, of course, as I highlighted, is transport operational services. The 26-27 estimate of what that costs across the region is around 85 million. The bulk of that is on a combination of contracts with bus operators and to fund concessionary fares. That will be funded from both the public transport contribution, or the levy that I referenced earlier, and government grant. So that means we're currently estimating the levy to be about 66 million for 26-27. The other key elements of the budget are some capacity building to deliver the recently published growth plan, to deliver and accelerate our delivery of brownfield housing, and importantly, to provide the revenue investment to make sure that we can unlock our capital pipeline, not least in transport. We're also investing in this budget in a range of professional and support services, finance, HR, and other support services, both to support the transport services, because obviously we'll be a much bigger organisation, much bigger support requirements next year, but also to reduce our reliance on interim and third-party resources. So we've got what we call a Path to Permanence programme, which this budget now reflects. There are some specific budget pressures and commitments that we've built in, totaling around 7 million. That includes some support to economic growth, recognising that we have lost SPF, and that's now gone from the budget next year. So there's some partial compensation in the budget for that. Around investment in spatial development and infrastructure planning beyond transport, including unlocking some of our strategic sites across the region, and some organisational development, additional costs in things like office accommodation and IT, because clearly we've just got more people, therefore we need to spend a bit more on IT. In terms of how we funded that, most of it comes from additional government grants that we're aware of, some support service contributions or recharges, some additional receipts that we expect from our treasury management activity. Those effectively are receipts on cash balances, and we are reducing our planned additions to reserve, but I would stress to the committee not to any sort of level that I would be uncomfortable with as a Section 73 officer. You can then see that is articulated. This is a table from the paper. That's how that then plays out in terms of 5 years across, and then where we're spending the money and indeed how we're funding it. And that's on the revenue side. I'll turn briefly then to the capital side. I won't labour the point around the TCR, the 2 billion announcement. That was covered by Edward and Alex in some detail, but just to recognise that that is profiled across the 5 years into the budget, including those blocks that have been subsumed, but also reflecting that that is a baseline funding guarantee for 3 years, and that's again reflected. We've had some additional brownfield housing monies through, but we've not yet programmed those, but I'll look to do that by the time we get to final budget. And we do get an additional 19 million in capital from our devolution deal. We get 19 million in revenue and 19 million in capital each year. That's guaranteed by government as part of our devolution deal. And so that is reflected in here. And we're making some investments in property systems and technology refresh. The capital programme is fully funded and there's no borrowing requirement across the MTFP period at this stage. And then that you can see that then, and that's in your papers, it's too small there to read, but that's effectively how we articulate the capital programme in terms of what we're going to spend the money on and then how we're funding it. I'm going to close there, Chair, and obviously invite questions.
Yes, thank you very much. There's obviously, in some ways there's a lot in there, and in others there aren't, because as you've pointed out, there are a lot of things that can change along the way between now and the 26th of January. So I'm going to throw it open to start with. If there's any direct questions. Sam first.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome the approach. I know it's a draft and a bit of a moving piece, but I just wondered, Mr. Williams, whether you could explain how you've approached the forecasting within the revenue and capital spend over the MTFP. Have you taken a sort of conservative approach, or have you been like overly optimistic? How have you gone about the forecasting?
I don't think I've ever been described as an optimist in relation to financial planning. No, I mean, we've taken an extremely cautious approach in the MTFP, not least because of two things. First of all, even 5 years is still a fair way out. We know there are a number of changes in relation to things that are being discussed around the role of, for example, of mayoral combined authorities. We had the recent announcement around police and crime commissioners, but that is still in the realms of the unknown, if you like, in that old parlance, unknown. So we don't know yet. So I haven't built anything in for those type of things that may happen or are likely to happen, but we don't yet have any substantiation or any quantification. So that's the first thing. The second thing, in relation to, as I mentioned, we've taken a cautious approach to grant funding. So, for example, where we have currently got grant funding and indications from government that grant funding will continue into future years, we've built it in at the current level where we don't have confirmation of next year. So Edward mentioned the bus grant. So we know what it was for 25-26. We're told it will come for 26-27, but we don't know at what level. So we built it in at 25-26 levels. And then, of course, we've taken some prudent assumptions in relation to our cost base. So, for example, and it's in the report, what assumptions we've made on things like inflation, pay awards, and indeed interest rates as well.
Andy?
Yeah, mine's a specific one, really, for maybe to take away and communicate. It's around the reserves on brownfield funding.
Yeah.
34 million.
Yeah.
And so my ask is that we made this point before about it's always been difficult with the criteria around Homes England for when you can actually apply for, and then the window for when it has to be spent by. Yeah. And that's why you get so many schemes that kind of put themselves forward because they think they're going to do it, and then obviously the design gets delayed, or the start on sites gets delayed, or then that means they can't spend it in the time, and it ends up with a lot of wasted energy and time and lost opportunity for others that may have got a scheme that fitted it. So I'm picking up on that, the fact that it's gone into the reserves and those schemes, that initially were allocated, it fell out, for various reasons. Yeah. So that's one part, where I think we need to go back and kind of, we want it to work, don't we? We don't want people to. Well, there's got to be a balance. You don't want spurious claims for things that aren't going to be delivered, but it does need some flexibility. The other part is.
Sorry, Andy, just before you move on to interrupt there, you also got another extra £19.7 million for that.
Yes.
And if we got money in reserves because some schemes fell out, then timely spending of that on appropriate schemes is vital, isn't it?
Can I actually answer that question first, as you pick it up, and then just in terms of how we've dealt with it, and it in part reflects where we are in the budget cycle. So what we've been able to do, and I accept there are some schemes that fall out, but there are still schemes that are very much live. And where we have a clear idea or path to those schemes, particularly on the original brownfield housing allocation, that is programmed into the capital programme. So that's already in the capital programme. The 19.7, we only recently got announced an additional 19.7 of Brownfield Housing Fund. We're still working through with colleagues how we programme that, i.e. what schemes that will be. And once I'm confident that there is a roadmap to delivery, that money, that 19.7 will come out of reserves and will be reflected in the capital programme. And I'm hopeful that 19.7 or a significant part of it can be programmed by the time we get to final budget setting.
Yes, so just picking up on that point, just to finish it off.
Yeah.
It's about fairness as well. So some of those that dropped out that might come back in, it's still worth raising the point that maybe others might have lost out because they didn't get the chance. I know they were passported across from central government on this occasion, but I still think it's a point worth making. And the other point is around the ambition of it as well, because it says brownfield and regeneration. Well, the viability of schemes, especially around town and city centres regeneration, they need that brownfield funding, otherwise that you're not going to be able to invest in the place. So it's just a question mark on whether the sums there are ambitious enough, and the answer to that question is, have we properly looked at a proper ask of what people want across the region for brownfield funding to make schemes viable?
And you can rest assured I'm already kind of encouraging and working with Edward and colleagues around that programme and making sure that we have as much visibility and certainty of that programme as soon as we can.
And it comes back to the ask again, though, because you'll find different people along here will go like, well, I never knew there was a brownfield funding thing.
Yeah. And in terms of what we're trying to achieve out of today's meeting, I think that's one thing that we will be looking for an update for in December.
Yeah.
So that when we come back in December, one of the things we can focus on. Yeah. To see what progress has been made in terms of that funding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Call out.
Yeah.
Not a call out.
Okay. Where were we? Emily, Councillor Longsdale first, and then you, David. Emily first.
Thank you, Chair. My question's around a very small part of the budget. So culture, arts and tourism is obviously, for obvious reasons, very small, but it is incredibly small when considering that culture, arts and tourism affects and is a boost to many of the other aims of this budget. What sort of rationale is behind that, and is there a way of maybe giving a bit more investment to the things that people love to do and bring people into our homes and our county?
Paul, remind me how much is in the budget in terms of that sort of thing.
So we put an additional 0.3 million. An additional 0.3 million. So we have within our strategy and inclusive growth directorate, within there you'll see there is a department for that, and we're putting an additional 0.3 million over and above some additional capacity we're building in. So staffing capacity, we're building in an additional 0.3 million for cultural and artistic events.
Okay.
I should say proposing to, because
how would that work then? How would that be administered or bid into, and how
that will be administered by the relevant directorate, staff within that directorate, the relevant director for visitor economy.
Because it's quite a large area, and particularly in terms of the counties, the tourism for the counties is massive, isn't it?
Absolutely. Now, there's also a paper that is going to EMCCA board on Monday, which talks about the broader economic growth, business advisory services, and broader support to the visitor economy activities and organisations. And whilst there is still further work to develop that operating model in the round, we are able to put aside for the next 2 years 2.4 million per annum to support that on an interim basis, and that detail is in the board papers for Monday and described in outline in the budget paper.
And is it the ambition of the authority, once we develops and we get to different level of funding from government, that we'll get more funding in relation to this?
I mean, and part of the challenge there, and this is about what we're able to do on an interim basis, is the fact that, and this has been well trialled, because as you know, the government had provided, and much of this funding was distributed, but 25 million of UK SPF funding. So that 25 million, 9 million was capital, 17 was revenue. That money's was due to end last year, but it was extended by 1 year, transferred to us. We then distributed it, but of course that funding then has stopped and is not available for next year. So what we've done, or what we're trying to do in these budget proposals, is to do what we can within our own resources to provide some interim support until we develop a longer term solution collaboratively with partners.
I guess that was going to be one of my follow-on questions, was with that funding stopping, what does that mean to the organisations on the ground who currently rely on the SPF funding? What's the mechanism for ensuring some continuity?
The principal mechanism, I mean, bluntly, is the fact that people have known, or those organisations have known for some time, that funding was coming to an end, so have been planning on that basis.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does, thank you.
David, and then I'll come back to you, Andy.
Okay, thank you. Just first of all, I've always impressed by the travel to the region from elsewhere times, which means that we've got a large population that could make use of the sorts of cultural activities that funding here would provide. And I was wondering whether there was so following up on your question, whether we were talking to the Arts Council and others who fund arts programs and so on, and perhaps devote too much money to the southeast in comparison with regions such as ours. But that wasn't the reason I put my hand up. The reason I was wondering, going back to the brownfield sites, whether you had a pipeline, whether you had a list of all the brownfield sites that different councils are trying to develop, and whether there was a pipeline, or you knew what stage of development each of those brownfield sites was at.
So I'm sure we do, and I don't have it immediately to hand, Councillor Hughes, but what I can say is where we have that pipeline, we've programmed, as I said earlier, we've programmed that into the capital programme, and I think there's 14 million programmed for next year and the year after on brownfield housing. I've held the additional funding, the 19, back in reserves until we have that pipeline, and that's being worked on at the moment. And as I say, we're hopeful that by the time we get to final budget setting, we can actually set out with more clarity the fuller pipipeline for brownfield.
I was thinking of
Sorry, David, this is where I think, in terms of identifying things we want to focus on in December, I think it's an area where we can ask for much more detail in December.
Okay, can I just ask one follow-up though? Could we? I was thinking of a pipeline really being the stage before a developer would ask for support funding, the stage which the local authority is involved, where they are promoting brownfield sites to the developer, and so it's pre-funding, so that you know what funding applications may come in subsequently, and you can have a longer time horizon for the funding allocation associated with those brownfield sites. So it's stepping back a stage in the program. So you're looking at potential areas where you will fund, say, 2 or 3 years hence, rather than over the next couple of months or 6 months or whatever.
So, I mean, all I would say is that's going to probably beyond my kind of level of expertise and knowledge specifically around brownfield housing. So I think it's a really good idea now that I have some advance notice, that I can make sure that we do the relevant research and potentially bring the relevant colleagues along to the next meeting to scrutinise that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, and to include some detail on the amount of that funding that's had to go into reserves and the balance, and the additional funding, how that's going to be developed as we go along. So, Andy.
Yeah, I want to come back to the UK SPF and something you mentioned already. So the journey, obviously, it's European funding, UK SPF funding, 75-25. That when it came across to EMCCA for 1 year, there was a massive lobby around the feedback from all the districts across the counties, whatever, that, you know, it's the revenue element. It was all these organisations that during COVID, community champions, really were doing stuff really close to community that was delivering. And so through that feedback, EMCCA did, it was great to their credit, they kind of flipped it, it became 2/3 revenue on 1/3 capital, and it really helped in communities. But the 1 year cliff is really, you know, it's gonna, as we've said, loads of organisations are absolutely going to be floored by this. So my appeal is that we, you know, you say you've done a conservative budget, and we don't know what, you know, how it's going to pan out once the government have said what they're going to do. But I think you need to look to wherever on all the other strategies where you can maybe help communities through that capital revenue, because I can give you an example on our plan for neighbourhoods call out we've just done, 350% over ask on revenue, because again it's the 75 capital 25, and all these are the organisations that are really health and well-being that are keeping people going. So, you know, can you think about that, because you might be able to do something in the Youth Trailblazer, or get people working plan, or other strategies where you target the money to those communities. They're going to need it.
Yeah, but as Richard points out, they have been aware of the deadline for us, and hopefully they've been thinking around and looking at other funding areas where they might be able to achieve what it is they need to be able to continue in the ideal world. Okay, any other questions? Kevin? Yes.
You may not be the right person to ask the question or to answer the question, but the one figure that struck me when I added the two papers together was the employee budget, and the jump from the current figure of this year of about 17 million to about, was it 26 million next year. That's more than most districts and councils spend on this, which gives us a sort of size of what EMCCA is. Subject to the known unknowns like the PCC role, are there any other knowns that will increase that over coming years that you can't include in the figure, or is this the sort of optimum size now of the EMCCA organisation?
So it's a good question. So the first thing, so absolutely. So the jump from 17 to 24, I think it is from memory. That is accounted for by, first of all, 3.5 million is the transport staff. So we're expecting to 2p across to the organisation, somewhere in the order of 70 colleagues across from the constituent councils into EMCCA. So 3.5 million of that additional staffing cost is in relation to
Just change landmarks basically and work for a different employer.
On a regional basis, in all of that, all of the benefits that brings. But yes, you're absolutely right. But yes, so that's about half of it, and then the other half is in relation to what we've called two things: our path to permanence. So what we're doing is we are investing in ensuring we've got a permanent staff base across our functions, and particularly in areas like finance and HR and ICT, as opposed to relying either on interim resources, which obviously cost us a bit more, or quite a bit more, but were necessary as we were setting up. So that path to permanence programme, we're now down to less than 30% of our staff are interims, and most of those are in programmes where you'd expect them to be, rather than covering roles like mine or Nick's or whatever. So that's the first thing. And the second thing that we've been doing is a programme we've called Shaping EMCCA, where we've looked at our resource needs for the future. So we've published the Inclusive Growth Plan, so obviously we need to support that. We've talked about the visitor economy, we need to support that. We've talked about unlocking some of our key strategic sites and our economic, in our spatial development, so we need to support that. The brownfield housing. That brownfield housing fund is a capital only fund, so we need to fund the staff that are needed to deliver that. So that comprehensive exercise has been undertaken, and then the staffing and capacity proposals are then reflected in that staffing number that we've arrived at. It's probably worth, just by way of conclusion, and it's in the report, that even when you allow for that growth from those two kind of key sources, our staffing budget is still only 12% of our overall spend. So.
I'm not being critical or anything like that. It's just about understanding.
Yeah.
And so, when this budget's in place and the staff are in place, then that's about the optimum size of EMCCA for the foreseeable future, subject to the PCC patch transfer or something like that.
Subject, and of course, So we're very much looking at sort of almost trying to future-proof ourselves for several years. Now, I can't say that we'll future-proof ourselves for the full 5 years, but certainly for the next few years, based on the responsibilities that we currently have. Now, if we inherit further responsibilities, then that will change yet again.
That's an excellent leading, because that was the point I was going to make, Kevin, is in relation to some interest in this Path to Permanence project and the shaping of EMCCA.
Yeah.
And just to really, in the December meeting, focus on some numbers.
Yeah.
And different departments in terms of their interim levels, and then, but also to include the accommodation strategy.
Yeah.
Because I'm aware that where you are in Chesterfield is no longer manageable, if you like, and there is a plan for an interim accommodation. When you talk permanence, EMCCA needs a permanent base at the end of the day.
It does.
And I understand the issues with that, and the availability of the right premises for a permanent basis might not become clear until local government reorganisation is sorted. But I think it's a subject that we can focus on in December at our informal meeting, with some figures, with some progress reports on it, and that was new to me, the 12% figure for staffing. Is that cost? The 12% is the cost of the organisation, if you like.
Yeah. So of our gross revenue expenditure, how much do we spend on staffing? It's just 12%.
I was just acutely aware when EMCCA was being set up and being discussed, one of the main factors was the size of the organisation. We looked at the time, you've got the West Midlands and the Greater Manchester organisation, and the machinery there and staffing numbers and everything there is massive. And I think there was an ambition to keep East Midlands Combined Authority levels to a more reasonable level. So I'm interested to see what progress we've made on that, or what the direction of travel is in relation to that.
Yeah, I mean, I can reassure. First of all, clearly part of that growth in the staffing is relation to direct operational things that we are being responsible for next year. Particularly that transport operational stuff. But I can also assure, and we can come back to it in December, that we've done a very kind of comprehensive and kind of robust challenge process around ensuring that we're as lean as we possibly can relative to the things that we have to deliver.
Okay. So, are there any more questions in relation to the draft mayoral budget, which is item 7? You sort of covered both of them, Richard, I think.
Yeah, I can just very, very, very briefly cover the mayoral budget. So the mayoral budget is around about £1 million and that effectively covers the cost of the Mayor's office, her travel, and a contribution to support services, because we obviously support the office. It also allows some opportunity for some specific mayoral priorities to be funded. The mayoral budget is itself specifically funded by government, by what's called the Mayoral Capacity Fund, and we've built in as a funding of the mayoral budget that contribution from government. So effectively, it's a £1 million cost of mayoral function, funded by a £1 million government grant.
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Will the mayoral budget outputs be recorded separately?
When you say the output,
Or what's that million achieved? What's it's been spent on and what's it achieved? Will it be accounted for separately? Will it be visible?
yes,
out
it
with
is
the main
accounted for and
budget?
it's monitored separately. Absolutely, yeah.
And the outcomes identified?
Yeah. Very, very clear what that money is being spent on. Yes.
Okay, so thank you for that, Richard. Obviously, the ambition for your presentation for this meeting was to consider if there are any direct recommendations to the next board. I think we're not really at that stage because it is a draft budget.
Yeah.
And we'll have opportunities both in December and January to look at it
Yes.
in more detail, and hopefully before we meet on the 22nd of January we'll have an idea of what recommendations we want to put on the 26th, so we can be timely in submission to recommendations on the 26th. So yes, Andy.
Yeah, I thought we actually did have a few asks of Richard through the discussions there, markers.
For December, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we'd want to record them as when we come back to say, have we been able to move any of those forward?
I think so. So I think I've recorded a particular interest in the brownfield housing, where we are to do a bit of a deep dive on that, which is always the intention of December, and then a bit of a deep dive on the kind of shaping EMCCA, the staffing side of things and the capacity of the organisation.
And I also one on the potential for help with the UKS disappearing.
UKSPF.
Because
yes.
So those will be the
skills side. There's plenty of opportunity to maybe help out.
Okay, so those are the three things we'll look to focus on in December at the informal meeting, as we consider, as we know a bit more about what the actual funding levels are.
I'll know what the Chancellor has said next week as well.
Yeah.
By then.
All right. I think that's the recommendations from today, or our actions out of today's.
Yeah.
And go from there. All right. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Nick. We'll move on to item 8, which is actually our work programme for an update on the work programme. Michael, do you want to?
Yes, so
you've
got the work forward plan in front of you. My proposal is that we actually review it at the December informal. If you're happy to do that, I'll put out a call for other scrutiny topics to slot in on the basis of one in, one out. If there's already 2 items on the agendas, because that's the norm. But if you feel as though that there are opportunities to do new scrutiny topics, then let's do that. Reflect on it at the December workshop. I'll circulate around the kind of template to identify those scrutiny topics to both you as members and to officers, if you're happy to do that.
Okay.
Great.
So on the bottom of that list is the volunteers we've had so far in terms of rapporteurs.
Yes.
For the various committees. Do you want to just through them, David, or
yep.
tell us where we're at with that?
So
Thank you for those that have expressed an interest, direct interest.
So at the moment, we've got volunteers for investment in the form of Kevin, but second choice, noted. Transport and digital connectivity, both Kevin and Mayor Abrahams have put themselves forward. Skills and employment, Jonathan has put himself forward. And farming and rural communities, which isn't a committee, but it's still a portfolio. And we understand that Edward is going to be the director, relevant director, so we put you in touch with Edward. Councillor Brennan has kind of indicated interest, let's say. So ideally, I would imagine it'd be better if there were 2 councillors on each theme to help spread the workload. But that's your decision, really. I mean, it's not up to me.
It would be nice to allocate nominate a voting member and a non-voting member to each. So we've still got opportunity to clarify this before December. So any other expressions of interest, let us know. Otherwise, what we'll probably do is sit down, look at your levels, your interests, and make some allocations.
The only thing is the working group, the transport one is on the 4th of
Yeah,
December.
4th of December, yeah.
So a decision as to who does it will need to be taken fairly quickly.
Yep.
So that we can
Well,
put
I'm
that into
happy
effect.
for, do you both want to attend on the 4th?
Sorry, Chair. I'd be interested in going to that one because the next investment one I know I definitely can't get. So I'd sooner be on something I can go to rather than something that I know I can't go to.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Are you all right with that, Andy?
I'm going to attend on the 4th.
So you both go on the 4th, so we know we're right.
Are you going to send invites out?
No, 11 o'clock. I'll send you the. So I believe it is it's a Teams meeting. No, it's not. Is it? They've got a room. So I'll make sure through Edward that you get on the invitation list. It's not in my gift to invite you, but I'll make sure that you are you're included in the invitation list.
Do we know where it's going to be?
Derby City Council offices. County
Derby
Council.
Council at Matlock.
Yeah.
Okay. And we'll finalise that rapporteurs list on the 17th of December.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other?
Just finally, you've also got in front of you what I'm now calling the action log, which are the logs from meetings like these. Like we've just indicated what we're going to do on the 11th. That's an action that I'll log down. So it's as much as an aid memoir for me to make sure that the actions are delivered, if you like, but also you to monitor actions that have arisen from meetings and make sure that they've been done as you asked. If you feel as though anything's not been done as you asked, then let me know.
Okay. Good. I think that concludes the business of our committee meeting today.
Can I have one AOB, please, Chairman?
Shall we squeeze an AOB in?
It's a very quick one, just to remind the committee that I did volunteer Rushcliffe Borough Council for our meetings. We are very accessible both by car and public transport. You haven't taken us up on the offer, but the offer is still open.
There is an ambition to go there
in January.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah. Got away with that one. That was a very nice short AOB. We can deal with them. Thank you everybody for your attendance. We'll hopefully see you in December. So I won't wish you a happy Christmas yet. Thank you very much.